Hello again. I wanted to spend some time talking about panic attacks because of all the features of anxiety and all the strange feelings that you can get with it. Panic attacks are by far the most upsetting and the thing that can cause the most problems in people's lives. This has certainly been true in my own case. I talked a lot on my other recordings about panic and how my understanding of it changed over the years. And I think I need to go into more detail here, because it's not something that you have to live with for the rest of your life. You need to understand what it is, you need to understand what it can do and what it can't do, and you need to know how to deal with it. And there are ways of dealing with it, so it no longer restricts your life as it probably is now. Now the things to mention first is, no doubt if you've tried talking to other people, your family or doctors or anybody else, about your panic attacks, the most difficult problem of all is getting them to understand it. Now, most people, unless they've actually had it themselves, they do not understand what you're talking about. You talk about being very, very afraid, which is what panic is. It's an extreme form of fear, the most extreme form you can feel. And if you try and describe it to somebody who's never had one, all they do is they tend to equate it with their own experience. In other words, everybody has felt frightened by something or someone at some point in their life, and it's probably just the ordinary feeling of fear that people have, say for example, before a job interview or before an exam. That it's fairly mild, shall we say, and it's not on a par with a panic attack. So this is the first problem you're going to encounter, is trying to get people to understand exactly what a panic attack feels like and what it does to you. Now, I've been amazed over the years how few doctors understand it. I mean, why should they? They're just like anyone else. They probably understand it from a medical point of view. Well, I wonder how many of them have actually ever experienced it themselves. Probably very, very few. So that is the first problem you face, trying to understand, get other people to understand you and to help you. Because what I often do is, people who don't understand it or never had it, I say, well, try and imagine your worst fear and then magnify it at least 10 times. And then imagine having that worst fear 10 times magnified over and over and over all day long. Now, you say that to someone, they just can't get their heads around it. It doesn't make any sense to them because they can't conceptualize it. They can't get an idea of what the hell you're talking about. So you feel frustrated and angry because people don't get it. They just don't understand what it's about. So that in itself is a big hurdle to overcome. Now, I've talked quite a bit about Jeffrey Holmes's book, The Panic Switch, because he has kind of nailed it down in terms of what the reason for it, basically, for why you get panic attacks. And I'd like to tell you how it's been with me and how I've actually applied some of the things I've learned about panic, because this is the problem. It's an experience that you feel as if you have absolutely no control over it. It's like your body goes berserk, and you're in this state, and you can't do anything to stop it. Once it gets going, you're stuck with it for as long as it lasts. And I think this is, above all, this is the thing that frightens people the most, is the fact they feel so out of control. They can't switch it off, they can't avoid it, they can't do anything about it. That's how it seems. It just feels totally like, it's totally out of your control. So, I mean, what do you do in these situations? I mean, the thing that happens so much when people have their first panic attack, as I described in my story, their first reaction is shock and disbelief, because they can't, well, I mean, for a lot of people, they don't even know what it was. Because it's so different from any sort of normal fear they felt before that, it feels like it's something completely new and something potentially very, very dangerous to them. In fact, it can feel so bad, it can feel as if you're dying. It feels as if your end's come, because it's so intense. And so many people end up in emergency rooms because something like that has happened to them, and they're scared for their lives. And when they get told, when they've been checked over to the emergency room, that there's nothing wrong with them, and it was just a panic attack, well, it doesn't really help. Because, if it was something physical, something they could grasp, something that they knew that could be treated, then that's more difficult to come to terms with. That's more easy to come to terms with. But for a panic attack, just being told you've had one doesn't help at all. Because then you're just left baffled and mystified as to why it happened in the first place. And more to the point, you're baffled because you don't know what the hell you're supposed to do if it happens again. And as I talked about in my recordings about my own experience of it, it's bound to happen again. If you fear something in that sense, in terms of a bodily experience, and as it involves your nervous system, it's inevitable that you're going to experience it again. It's highly unlikely that you will not experience it again. And that's how the panic cycle starts, and that's how it's maintained. Now, I must say up front that panic attacks are not dangerous. They're not going to do anything to you. Nothing. They are your body's response, an emergency response, for when it feels you're in intense danger. It is literally a red alert in your body. It's the highest form of alert that your body can produce. So it's designed to protect you. It's designed to get you out of trouble. It's designed to make you flee the situation you're in, or it's designed to make you fight, if that is what's required. So, from that point of view alone, it's, in spite of how dreadful it feels to you physically, it's not going to do you any harm. And if you're somebody that's had many of these, you'll begin to appreciate that fact that you feel scared to death, yes, but it doesn't actually change anything about you physically. Now, I talked in my other recordings about the role of sensitization, because that is very, very important when it comes to understanding the intensity of panic attacks and their frequency. Because as I talked about before, sensitization is a state in which your nervous system is conditioned to react in an exaggerated way, and it does so great intensity and great speed, so the tiniest little thing can trigger its reaction. And if you're in that state, and like I described in my story, how it happened to me, it doesn't take much at all. And this, I think, is another aspect that frightens people so much, is the fact that it does come so quickly and so apparently out of the blue. It just seems to happen for no obvious reason. Now, I want to do something here which I don't think other people have ever really talked about, and that is to describe the different types of panic attack that I've certainly experienced. Most people who talk about panic talk about it just as a single entity. Doesn't have any variations. Now, I have certainly experienced variations to it, and I want to tell you about them because it's possible you've experienced these yourself. Now, the first type is the one that most people associate with panic. I tend to call these fear flashes, because although they are panic, there's a subtle difference between these and the other types I'm going to talk about. A fear flash is when something suddenly startles you or frightens you, and you feel it in your body as a kind of a spasm. It starts in your stomach area, and it seems to go right through your body. It's sort of like all your nerves are suddenly on fire, and it flashes right through your body. And once that flash has occurred, then you start getting all the other manifestations of panic, which is the shaking, the heart pounding, breathing hard or difficulty in breathing, sweating, dry mouth. Though that is a sort of a typical experience for many people of a panic attack, and that's what they call it, a panic attack. Now, there's a slight variation on that one, which is something I've not had that often. But I mean, the end result is still the same in that all the symptoms, the shaking, the dry mouth, so on, all that has happened. But this second type of panic I've had is one which feels as if somebody's just shot about 10,000 volts of electricity through you. It feels like your whole body, it just goes from head to toe, like a huge shock of energy goes right the way through you. It's not like anything else I've ever experienced. It's like a huge electric shock you've just received. And it's followed by all the feelings, the shaking, the trembling, all the rest of it. Now, the third type is one where the panic builds over a period of time. It's not a sudden flash of fear like you get with a sudden fright or sudden shock. It gradually builds up over minutes, hours, and it can go on and on. Now, this is the kind of panic I've had when, as I've talked about before, your breathing is wrong, when you're breathing in a shallow way. And a certain point is reached, a kind of a threshold, where your body triggers the panic response, but it does it in a much more gradual way. If you continue to overbreathe, and excuse me, and this has happened to me more times than I can remember, if you continue to overbreathe or breathe in a shallow way, and you keep on doing it, eventually it triggers a release of adrenaline into your bloodstream. And with me, it has tended to be self-perpetuating. In other words, the more the effects of this overbreathing are felt in terms of fear and panic, the more you're frightened of it, and so it just continues to mount and mount and mount. Now, this is it's not a sudden onset of panic, it's just a gradual onset where the level of anxiety you feel builds and builds over hours. And as it builds, your breathing continues to get faster and faster, and your body is still responding. It's still trying to make you breathe properly. And so you're actually making it worse because you're reacting to the fear with faster breathing and so on, and it just keeps on going and going and going. These, to me, are by far the worst types of panic attack because they just are relentless. And in the past, I would spend whole days, sort of 2 or 3 times a week like this, whole days feeling like this, and it would go on all through the day into the evening. I'd go to bed, try to get to sleep, and I couldn't because it was still going on. And eventually, it would finally fizzle out because you just were too tired, and it would just kind of fade away by itself. Now, I used to absolutely dread days like that. Totally dread them because there seemed to be no way I could actually stop them. Now, I understood what was happening to me. I understood it was the fast breathing that was causing it, but I couldn't stop it. I couldn't make myself slow down. And in my own case, as I've talked about before, I was always terrified that panic was going to make me vomit, and that was my phobia. And of course, in that state, your stomach gets into a complete knot, and of course you feel very sick. And that is the reason, in my case, why the fear used to keep on and on and on. Now, for you or anybody else, it could be a totally different thing that you fear will happen as a result of you panicking. That is always the thing that people have going through their minds when they panic. They fear a certain outcome to it. It could be any number of things. They think they're just going to lose control. They're going to start raving and ranting and screaming and shouting. They think they're going to collapse or pass out or just go insane. They think they're even going to die. It feels that bad. And non-sufferer, let's try that again. People who don't suffer from panic, they can't understand this because they don't understand why you're acting as if it was so bad, because they can't conceive of that intensity of fear. Okay, so those are the different types of panic I've certainly had. Now, the approach to panic is the same as I've talked about with regard to anxiety. Panic can and does die away surprisingly quickly if you approach it the right way. Now, in Jeffrey Holmes's book, The Panic Switch, he describes his own experience of seeing panic vanish. And in his case, it disappeared for good. He completely lost his fear of it, and that was it. He didn't panic anymore because he no longer feared it. So there was no reason for him to actually panic anymore. And I said I can verify that approach works because I've done it myself, and I'll tell you how it happened with me. I was on a trip, a long car trip. I was going to have to make a 250-mile trip up the motorway, driving fast, and I was already in an anxious state, just the thought of doing it. And when I set off, I began to feel the old telltale symptoms of panic rising. It was in the stomach. That's always where it starts. And I tried my best to just let it happen. And then I got onto the motorway. I was driving fast, and gradually, as this was my breathing again, my breathing started to speed up, and I could feel the panic rising. And I thought, oh my God, how on earth am I going to be able to drive all this way feeling like this? And gradually the panic got intense, more and more intense. And after about 10 miles into the trip, with all this going on, it was so bad. I thought, oh my God, this is going to make me vomit now. This is so bad, it's going to make me vomit. And I was in a terrible state, and I thought, I can't do this. I can't do this journey. How am I going to do it? And I was on the point of looking for the next exit so I could just turn around and go straight back home. But something happened, and I thought, well, I knew about this idea of just letting panic do whatever it wanted to do. And I figured, well, I've got nothing to lose. And at that moment, when the panic was raging inside of me, I thought, right, okay, I can't stop you, so just do what the hell you want to me. I was really prepared to let the panic do anything to me, even kill me. And when I really, really felt that, and I was actually telling the truth, I was going to let panic do whatever it wanted to me, and I believed it. At that moment, suddenly it just all died down, just very quickly. In a matter of about a minute or two, it just faded away. And I thought, what? How did that happen? And I a few miles from where that happened, there was services. I pulled my car into the services, parked it, and I got out and just sort of stood for a couple of minutes and thought, what the hell happened there? Because although I was still feeling the after effects of it, still a bit trembly and a bit weak and wobbly. The actual panic had died away completely, and I just felt totally shocked because I had given in to the very worst at its very peak, and it just vanished. It just totally stopped. I was completely amazed by this because it just proved everything I'd learned about panic from Jeffrey Holmes and from his ideas. It proved it was true. So that tells you the key to stopping panic from happening and from curing yourself of it. It all has to do with your fear of it. Now, I think I've described exactly the right approach. You have to let panic do its thing. You can't just hope panic won't go. You have to be totally 100% committed to letting panic do whatever it wants to, literally anything it wants to, and you have to totally surrender to it. And in Jeffrey Holmes's book, he describes the mechanism whereby this works, because basically panic is fear of itself. So if you take away the fear of it, there is nothing to keep bringing it back. You're no longer afraid of it. It doesn't need to exist anymore. I know for a lot of people that sounds just ridiculous. It just sounds impossible. And the very thought of actually being prepared to let panic happen in this way just seems too much to ask. It just seems totally impossible and just beyond their capabilities. Now this is a thing where you have to understand what is actually happening in a panic attack, because you already experienced the fact that panic appears to be totally outside your control, which it is. It's outside of your direct control because it involves the involuntary nervous system. And involuntary obviously means you don't control it. It happens by itself. So when you're in a panic attack, there's not a lot you can do consciously to change it. Okay, lots of people say there are various things you can do to calm panic down. You can, for example, change your breathing pattern. You can do all sorts of things to distract yourself. These are kind of indirect ways of affecting panic. But in those cases, it doesn't actually remove your fear of the panic. The fear of it still remains because you're finding subtle or not so subtle ways of avoiding it. And if you're avoiding something, then obviously you're still afraid of it. Why else would you avoid it? Whereas, by facing it head on and letting it do its worst to you, you're taking away the fear of it, because you experience for yourself the fact that panic actually doesn't do you any harm. And by inviting it to do you harm in that sense, and it doesn't, then you think, well, what was I so frightened of? It's not done anything to me, it's not killed me, it's not driven me mad. It's just a horribly intense feeling that if I face it and let it happen in this way, it just goes away all by itself. It stops all by itself. Now this is an extremely difficult thing for people to do, because they have no direct experience of that happening until they actually do that themselves, until they experience it for themselves. They might think it sounds logical and sensible in their minds, but they have to experience it in their bodies. That is the trick, and that is what I did that day on the motorway. I was willing to let panic do whatever it wanted to. And my total willingness to let it happen is what stopped it, because it switched itself off. It's like your nervous system thought, oh, okay, there's no need for me to be here anymore. I'll switch off, and that's exactly what happened. Yeah. So many panic treatments these days are geared at avoidance, avoiding the panic, trying to avoid situations where the panic happens, trying to avoid panic when it is happening, but there's no permanent cure in that. You're still vulnerable to panic. You're still at its mercy because you're still trying to get out of its way, so to speak. You're still trying to avoid having it. And there's no permanency in that, no permanent solution in that. You're just getting used to it. You're trying various techniques to actually prevent it. The only permanent cure that I know of is to do that, is to face it head on and then let it do whatever it wants to do. So few people are willing to do that because of the intensity of it, because it feels so bad. And it's a great shame because you're condemning yourself to a life where panic is always lurking in the background, and you still have this kind of dread of it happening and what it might do when it does happen. And it's no way to live because it's holding your life to ransom. You're just waiting for the next one to happen. You fear for your life about what it might do to you. So, to tell you about my approach to panic now, well, as you'll probably experience in your own life, there always seems to be certain things, certain situations, certain feelings in your body that can trigger a panic attack. Or it's simply the feeling of panic attack, the panic itself, the way it starts in your body and how you begin to feel. And then once you feel the telltale signs of a panic attack, you're tensed up against it, think, no, not this again. Of course, what else can you do but panic? You're fighting it. But there are other things that can trigger it, like I say about the overbreathing. That's why I described those days of panic I used to get. And there are other things, other situations where people find themselves trapped. Feeling trapped is probably one of the worst, is being somewhere where you think there's no escape. And you've got to stay where you are. And just even thinking, I'm trapped here, is enough to bring on a panic attack because you think, oh God, I can't get out of this. So naturally, it's a natural reaction because it's seen by you as a terrible threat, and if it's that bad a threat, your body reacts with a suitable response, and that is the panic attack. So whatever it is that triggers you, the way to deal with it is always the same as I've been describing. Now for me nowadays, the things that I've talked about, the effect on my balance and the problems I've had with my balance over the last year since I had that slight stroke. But that, I think, is my main trigger at the moment. But even having said that, I can get anxious over it sometimes. It depends how bad it gets. If my balance goes really off, and especially if it's of the vertigo kind of balance problem, that can trigger panic in me. I was like, oh my God, I'm either having another stroke or this is just going to go on, and all sorts of stupid thoughts like that could go through my mind. So that is capable of still producing a panic in me. But whatever the cause, whatever might cause me to panic, I know now how to deal with it. If I wait and let it do its thing, let it flash through me, just wait for it to continue and finish, and try not to add too much extra fear to it by fearing the panic attack itself. Within about 5, 10, 15 minutes, it's gone, completely gone. And it's that simple. Not easy to do, but the idea is so simple and so effective. So, I think I've covered most of what I wanted to say about panic, and I'm sure there's plenty of questions people have. I mean, if you want to ask me questions on my page here with this video, please do, because if I can help, I will be only too happy to help, because I know just what absolute havoc panic attacks can wreak in people's lives. It can be a nightmare. You live in a nightmare world where this thing is absolutely controlling everything you do, and you feel as though your life has been destroyed by it because it controls you. Well, I'm here to tell you that you have a way to get out of it. It takes some courage, yes, it does take some courage. But once you've done it, and once you've experienced panic die down all by itself, it gives you such a confidence, it gives you such a feeling inside that it doesn't matter anymore. Even if I do panic, who cares? Let it panic, let yourself panic as much as you want to. You know what to do. And when you get that experience, and when you feel it, it's such an amazing feeling, because you feel at last you're going to get your life back, and that's what it's all about. It's getting your life back and getting yourself free of all this panic misery. So, as I say, if you want to ask me any questions, put any comments on here, please do. I'll try and answer them the best I can based on what I know. I'm not the ultimate authority on panic, but I do have many years' experience of it, so chances are I've been through what you've been through at some point. Anyway, that I think is covered the most of the ground. If I think of other areas I want to cover, I will certainly do another recording, but for now, thanks for watching, and I hope it's helped in some way. I hope it's helped explain things to you a bit better, because that is what you need. You need understanding, and you need a plan with which you can tackle your panic attacks, and I hope that's what I've given you here. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.